There's a lot of really great beneficial things that you can do for the health of your overall saltwater tank, but what about things that you should be avoiding? Well, if you're looking for things to avoid doing when it comes to taking care of your saltwater tank to help make sure it lasts longer, then this video is for you. Hi there, I'm Hilary for Waterlogged on behalf of SaltwaterAquarium.com. In this video, I'm going to go over a handful of things that you should avoid doing in order to help your saltwater tank stay around for quite a long time and to be a really overall healthy, easy to take care of tank. Okay, the first thing on my list of things that you should avoid is overfeeding. I feel like overfeeding is one of those things that's pretty easy to do, especially if you've got fish that have those personalities. Every time you walk by, you want to add just a little bit of food to your tank. But I would urge you to stick to a feeding schedule, and that way you are not going to have an excess of nutrients. Why is an excess of nutrients bad? Well, when your nutrients are out of whack, your water parameters can be thrown off. This can lead to different sort of issues within your system, such as algae. Now, algae might not seem like that scary, but there are some types of algae that when it takes hold, it can take over and grow so fast that it will grow over your corals. And while you can clean it out, it might cause some damage to your tank along the way. So that's why it's important to keep that feeding in check so that you don't have your nutrients getting out of control. Now, another way that you could get your nutrients and have them go out of control is by lighting. Now, when you have your lights on for too long a period during the day, or if you have the intensity of your lights set up way too high, that can also cause an excess of nutrients and, as a result, an excess of algae. And honestly, we all hate dealing with algae, so just make sure the lights are in line and where they should be. Another reason where lights can cause issues is with corals. When corals are first added to the tank, they're already under a large amount of stress, so adding them to a new high intensity of light can cause them to be stressed even more, potentially even to the point of bleaching. And corals can stress out and bleach not just when you first add them to the tank, but anytime your lights are on way too strong and it's more than they can handle in the place that they are situated. Another area where we tend to do too much when it comes to our saltwater tanks is overfiltering. Now, as time has progressed and technology has increased, so too has the efficiency of the filtration equipment that we use on our tanks. Now, why is this a bad thing? Well, let's take a look at the wild ocean coral reefs. There's actually been a study done that said that the waste and excrement brought into a coral reef by reef sharks are part of what help to keep a coral ecosystem thriving and good. So if there's waste floating around in the water, the corals are actually utilizing that. If you look at ocean water, it's not pristine, perfect thing, and we shouldn't expect our tanks to be. So some amount of filtration is obviously good. Just make sure you don't overdo it. Consider putting things on a timer so that you don't make that water too clean and too pure for your corals and your fish. Another area where I see huge issues come about in saltwater tanks and even freshwater tanks is through the introduction of pests. Now, there's really two schools of thought, the people that like to quarantine, the people who don't like to quarantine. I am in the school of thought you should always quarantine your tank. You never know what is in a tiny droplet of water, and with that can be a whole world of hurt. You can introduce things like a cryptocarian, you can introduce flukes, you can introduce flatworms and red bugs, all sorts of things that can decimate a tank, both fish and coral, in just a matter of a week, if not even less. So make sure that you are doing what you can to eliminate any pests from getting into your tank. Be that quarantining or dipping a freshwater dip or a coral dip before you add things to your display. You really don't want to introduce pests when you could have avoided it. Now, another thing that you want to avoid doing, especially if you've got a tank full of gorgeous corals that are your pride and joy, is not doing your research before you buy. There's a lot of fish that are out there that potentially could eat corals. They're called corallivores. If you look at their behaviors and their diet when they're out in the wild, a lot of them will eat corals as just a part of their natural diet. But when we bring them in, you can train them to eat foods. However, if they get bored or if they get hungry, they might end up chowing down on some of the corals in your tank, and nobody wants that. So please make sure to do your research before you add any fish. You don't want them to be natural coral eaters. Now I mentioned fish, but fish aren't the only ones that you might be adding that could mess with your corals. There are also invertebrates that you could be adding that might be sold as part of a cleanup crew that will mess with your corals. A couple that come to mind are potentially arrow crabs and any of the species of decorator crabs. You think about their name, decorator, they're going to probably go around and take little clippings of your zoanthids and just make themselves look all fancy. Take it from my personal experience. Please do your research before you buy and add things to your tank. All right, a couple more things that you can do to mess up your tank, and one of them is actually messing with it too much. Even if you wash your hands, our bodies and our skins have natural oils, maybe little bits of dirt under our nails that we've missed when we've washed our hands, and by putting our hands in our tank all the time, adjusting corals, messing with things, just moving things around, that can actually impact your tank. So I would highly encourage you to avoid messing with your tank as much as possible. Okay, now the last thing I want you to be mindful of before I let you go is how much attention you're paying to your tank. I just told you not to have your hands in the tank all the time, but that doesn't mean that you can't spend time observing your system, knowing what healthy fish and corals look like, knowing exactly how your equipment is running and how it sounds. You'd be amazed at the number of aquarium hobbyists I've talked to over the years, and I personally have experienced this. I can be across the house in a totally different room and tell you that something's off with my tank, that maybe I forgot to add some top-off water to my ATO and that a tank is blowing air. Other keepers have said they've woken up in the dead of night to find out that something's wrong. Their skimmer is going crazy. So if you know what your tank looks and sounds like on a regular basis, you're going to be able to prevent a lot of major issues before they even happen, just because you paid attention. All right, I hope this has given you some things that you should be looking out for and helps to prevent you from making any detrimental mistakes when it comes to your tanks. If you have made a mistake or if you've learned the hard way from something, leave a comment, let us know. Hopefully, maybe we can learn from your mistakes and not make that same one ourselves. All right, this has been Hilary for Waterlogged on behalf of SaltwaterAquarium.com. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.